Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Hovercast Roundtable, your place for quality TCG content of all ages. I'm your host, Britt, and with me once again is Eric and Travis, and today we're going to be focusing on Expanded. Last episode we sort of touched on it, but didn't really get into it because we wanted to save most of the discussion for today. So for today, or for this weekend rather, it's the Collinsville, or I'll just say St. Louis because that's what it is for me, even though it's not technically St. Louis. But it's big regionals. I expect it to be pretty big. It's the first expanded tournament with the Sun and Moon set. And so I think we'll see a lot of new things, a lot of different things this weekend. But to jump into discussion today, I think we're going to go ahead and go with registration is in 15 minutes, and we have to pick a deck. So I want to go around the table and ask everyone else, what they would turn in as far as their deck list is concerned. So let's start with Eric. What would you play if you had to play registration in just a couple of minutes?
Probably Lurantis. Everyone probably thinks I would play Toadbats. Toadbats is still really good, but we've just been testing this Lurantis deck recently, and I think it's really, really good, and I would make a bold call and just go with Lurantis.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or do you want to save that for later? Just anything about the
let's save that for later, because I know we want to go a little bit
more in depth.
Travis,
you go ahead.
I honestly would probably play Toadbats. I think the deck is still insanely solid. I mean, it hasn't changed in 2 years. It's just, the concept has just kind of been Quaking Punch, Silent Lab, and bats, and it just is still insane. Sun and Moon is still kind of murky as far as expanded goes. It's not really fleshed out. And so I think that just going in, it's just a safe play, right? It's kind of the reason I played Mewtwo for Anaheim. I think it's just is still a really, really solid against all of this stuff that's new. So I'd rather just play something that I know is really good.
Yeah. I think I'm in a similar boat, honestly. I feel just in the few years Expanded has been, a thing, something we've had to worry about as competitive players. I just feel I haven't played it a bunch. And over the 2 or 3 years, my mentality the entire time has more or less been well, if all things go wrong, I can just play Toadbats, right? And that's sort of where I am once again. I think preparing for this tournament has been the most time I've actually spent working on Expanded, and so I'm learning stuff that a lot of people already know. Just because I haven't had to worry about it all that much. I only played it once last year, I think, and the year before that, I think you had to make Top Cut. And so that was a bigger task to worry about Expanded. But there's just a lot of stuff that's just wow, Evatol Maxis is really good. Stating the obvious. And for me, or for most people, I think that just that's the safe deck. If all things go wrong, I'll just play Evatol Maxis. And so with that in mind, that's I think why I would lean towards Toadbats, because Toadbats has a really good matchup against that deck, and that deck is just kind of a problem. For most other decks, it's just well, if they get Archeops out on their first turn, I just already lose. But so yeah, Toadbats is definitely my fallback, I think. And outside of that, I've been testing Lurantis and Tauros Garbodor, which I've written about in a Six Prizes article. But that's what I've spent the most time with. So I guess to segue things, let's go ahead and... So we've talked about our top picks very briefly here. Let's talk about maybe, an under-the-radar deck, something that people aren't talking about or aren't writing about that could be a sleeper pick or is low-key what everyone's playing and just not a lot of people are talking about it because they kind of want to keep it hidden. And that'll be a good time for us to talk about this Lurantis deck that we've been working on. But I'll start. And so I want to go ahead and talk about the Tauros deck that I've been playing. So the concept initially started as just Tauros is really good, and Expanded there's Aspertia City Gym, and I just was really enamored with the gimmick of those two cards from sort of the instant I started working on Sun and Moon decks. I just the concept just sounded really good to me. That's a big Tauros with a Fury Belt and extra damage or extra HP from the stadium. Just means you get an Outrage or a Rage and then the GX attack for a whole lot of damage. And then initially the list, I sort of modeled it after the Pidgeot deck that saw a little bit of play in the fall in Expanded, just sort of like punishing your opponent for attacking into it and then having Garbodor in the background. But I've sort of stepped away from that a little bit. It still plays Garbodor, but it's much less reliant on like backup attackers. I still have Mewtwo in the deck because Gallade is just like the easiest answer for anyone against Tauros. And so you just have to be able to kill Gallade pretty easily. So I have Mewtwo, and then I also have Lugia. It's the same card as Mewtwo, but it gets the little buff from Aspertia as well. But after that, it kind of looks like, like a Seismitoad deck. There's like Crushing Hammers, Enhanced Hammers, and Garbodor and stuff like that. But I really like that deck. I think it's really strong. I play Karen for the Battle Compressor decks. I think it's pretty strong, and with the exception of Gallade, like Gallade is, even with Mewtwo, I'm still probably going to lose to Gallade, which that's a risk I think is worth taking. It's hard to get out sometimes, and even still, if I can just go hard enough with Mewtwo, it's still winnable. But anyways, that's the deck. I'll try to make a video on it before this weekend. But Eric, let's hear from you next.
So I think we're all going to talk about the Lurantis deck after because we've all kind of been working on it. So I'll talk about two other decks that I really like that are under the radar. The first one is Vespiquen Flareon. I know a lot of people are really considering it, but no one really seems to be like writing articles or like making videos about it besides for in Standard, where everyone knows it's one of the best decks in the format. But I think in Expanded, it's really, really good. I think it's better than Night March because it gets to abuse Life Dew, while I think Night March, because Night March is kind of forced to run Archeops and Gallade right now, you have to run computer search to make that variant work. So I think Life Dew is like the most broken A-spec possible, and I think Vespiquen, besides for Sableye Guard, which abuses it the best, Vespiquen abuses it better than any deck. And I think just being able to win prize trades like that, and just being able to hit for weakness on Toads, especially with Vespiquen, is just huge this weekend. I think it's a really good deck. I think you can solve the Archeops issue by just playing a Wobbuffet and a Hex. You can also play the Evolution EVs with Blacksmith and 2 Fire Energy as well. That gets around it, so you can just evolve on turn 1 before they get an Archeops out. That's another way to deal with it. So there's definitely ways around Archeops with this deck, and I think if you can get around Archeops, Yveltal's a really easy matchup because you're trading 1 prize attackers for 2 prize EXs. So I think Vespiquen's one of those decks that's really good. The other deck that I really, really like, that I'm actually really considering, is Gardevoir. I think Mega Gardevoir in Expanded is incredibly broken, because you can abuse Dimension Valley and Max Potions. You're only attacking for 1 energy every turn, and you can just heal every single turn as well. So, like, you can just replenish your energy. You're never going to have a hard time attacking. And you're going to clear your board every time, so you're only going to have threats. You're not going to have any Lysander targets. You absolutely obliterate Yveltal because you're attacking for 1 energy and they hit you for resistance. So there's like no way they can win. Even if they get Archeops out, you can play Hex. And once you just get out 1 Mega Gardevoir, you're going to win because they're never going to kill it. It destroys Toad as well because it doesn't really like mind the item lock because you're going to get him turn 2 Mega Gardevoir. Worst case turn 3 if you don't hit a Link. And you're just going to keep hitting for 110 and never get anything Lysander stuck. So yeah, it just absolutely destroys item lock, including Trev, because it abuses Dimension Valley as well. Yeah, it's one of those decks that I really like. It loses to Night March and Vespiquen. It loses the compressor decks, even with a Karen. But I think if you can dodge like those like explosive non-EX matchups, and Rainbow Road too, I guess, that it loses to that, I think it's really, really good. I've heard a bunch of people in different testing groups talking about it, so I know it's like something that a lot of different people have come up with on their own. And it's something that I think you should look out for and definitely consider testing if you haven't.
Hey, before I let Travis talk here, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the Vespiquen deck.
Yeah.
So you're talking about playing it pretty like old school, just kind of like how the list was last year. Is that correct? Because you mentioned the Fire Energy and Blacksmith. Yeah,
so my list right now, I might make a video on it. We actually don't have a Tropical Beach on my account, so it's kind of hard to make a video because I need a beach for the deck. Yeah, so you would play Fire Energy. I think my list has probably changed maybe like 1 or 2 cards actually since I top 8'd with it in Kansas. I actually don't remember that exact list. I should probably look it up and see the differences. But yeah, it's very, very similar to how it was played back then with a Wobbuffet, like a Hex, just ways to get around Archeops, and like a slow setup deck with Beach and Life Dew, where eventually you're just going to run them out of resources because they're just not taking prizes efficiently.
See, that's interesting. One of the first decks that I thought of when I was, just reading the cards that were in Sun and Moon was that idea. But instead of I would still play Flareon for sure, but I was toying around with the idea of Umbreon GX and Dark Energy, which would theoretically solve your Trevenant matchup, and I think make some other matchups better. I'm not sure. Maybe the fact that it's a GX and also weak to fighting is just kind of problematic. But one of the reasons, I think at least, that Vespiquen sort of fell off in popularity towards the end of last year was just its horrible Trevenant matchup. There was just nothing you could do about it.
Yeah, I don't think it beats.
But Umbreon GX is really good. Like, people in Kansas, I know you didn't, but I think more people from my area, like Andrew Wamble, played some just like awful cards in their deck to like solve the Trevenant matchup. And it was like there's this older Umbreon and like a Rotom that both did nothing. But they were like, I don't know, I could be Trevenant with these cards, and they didn't still. But anyways, I just feel like, with the Umbreon you get lots of typings, and maybe you split the energy, I don't know. But any thoughts on that? You wouldn't play Umbreon even still?
I'm of the mentality that if you have an auto loss, you don't try to tech for it to make it potentially winnable. You just take that auto loss and you strengthen all your other matchups. So yeah, the Umbreon probably would help that matchup a little bit, but like having to split the energy, I only play 2 basic fire energy in my list right now, so it'd be like a 1-1, and there would be no point in playing Blacksmith, which is like another way to get around Archeops and Giratina as well. I don't think it's really worth it. I think trying to tech for an auto loss just isn't worth it, because in Expanded, there are so many different decks right now that are viable that the chances of you playing against the same deck more than once, even if it is like the best deck in the tournament and everyone's playing it, I don't think you're going to play it maybe more than twice. And you can take 2 losses and, just win everything else. So as long as your other matchups are good, I don't think you need to tech for an auto loss in Expanded.
Okay. Good to know. Travis, let's hear from you now.
So I think that a deck that is, I feel like it's always been kind of under the radar, but people, is Groudon. I think Groudon has always been very, very good, and like more often than not, it's probably been like one of the better plays for a lot of Expanded events. But it's just like never been an insanely popular deck because it needs 3 to 4 beach. So I think that like that restriction alone has always kept the deck out of the forefront of the metagame. But I do still think the deck is very, very good. I mean, it just drains your opponent's resources while it sets up this massive monster that can just win the game on its own. I don't think there's any like Sun and Moon stuff that really messes with that kind of strategy. I mean, like I can see Lurantis being difficult just because it's grass and can like potentially one-shot it. But you do still have Focus Sash. It is still going to come up, kill a Lurantis. Lurantis could do, the 240 and break the Sash, but then Groudon is still going to get the chance to take 2 more prizes with that. So I do still think it can trade fine. Focus Sash is an insane card on a Primal Groudon that can't have anything from it removed. I just think that, again, kind of like the same line of logic we were following with Toadbats, I just still think it's an incredibly solid like archetype, and I don't think that Sun and Moon has really messed with it at all. And kind of like what you guys were saying, like Toadbats, Yveltal are 2 of the most popular decks in the format, and I think that like Groudon is fine versus both of them. Yveltals aren't really playing Silent Lab anymore, which was like that's what they played to get around Mime, right? So that they could BKT the Groudon. But like I haven't seen like any Yveltal Maxie's deck, posted online on websites, what have you, with Silent Lab at all. And if they're not playing Silent Lab, they're not going to beat Groudon. That's just how it is. And I mean Groudon, it has access to the Giratina now, so it can fix Trev. Which I do think that Giratina solves your Trevenant matchup. I think Groudon is super underrated, and if you have access to tropical beaches, it's definitely a deck I would recommend for anybody to begin looking at.
For sure.
I think it's insane.
Would you play Aaron in there? That was something that I worked on a long time ago too. I almost went to Philadelphia regionals, and I was planning on playing Groudon. With Aaron, I guess. Are you more? I guess we have a pretty clear split in mentalities amongst our group. Eric is just like, no, just lose to it, it's fine. And I'm just like, no, I'm going to play 1 card for every matchup, and I'm going to beat everything. Where do you think you fall in the mentality?
So I think that if you want to beat like Night March or Vespiquen, I think that Groudon has to do it differently. I don't think you can just like play Karen and like, all right, got him.
No, I think I do overvalue the card for sure. But at the same time, I do also think that people like the stronger Vespiquen players, like people like again Andrew Wambolts, who not to knock him earlier, like I do think that Umbreon and Rotom are bad, but he's very good at these battle compressor decks that he has a ton of experience with, and I know that he is more of a cynic, a skeptic on Karen's power, and I'm a little more optimistic, I guess, but again, I guess that's just like a split in our mentalities.
I think that Groudon can be built to handle the compressor decks. You just have to build the deck correctly. Like, if you look at some of the Groudon lists that I've done well recently, like the top 8 Arizona one where Night March was all over the place at that tournament, right? One of the Cali guys that always plays Groudon, Steven Tobacco, maybe.
Stefan,
yeah, Stefan. Like he played like Scramble Switch.
Right?
What's up?
He played double Enhanced Hammer, right?
He played double Enhanced Hammer. He played Scramble Switch and
double Red Rock too.
Yeah, exactly. Like he just like built the deck to beat the compressor decks, and I think that's something you can do with Groudon. So if you wanted to like be teched to beat those decks, I think the Groudon's a deck you just build a little differently and can do it, because it can't really like fit the Toad Karen combo as well as a lot of other things can.
One of the problems I would foresee with Groudon looking forward, and this can segue us into our next topic, but Groudon, if Decidueye is popular at all, there's like no way Groudon does well, right?
Well, it can't get around wall.
I don't think that card like as big as Groudon, but its ability breaks the sash on its own, and then presumably like 2 more abilities, and then Razor Leaf is enough to kill it. So Decidueye, that's a hot topic too, and more or less we've talked about Toadbats, and one of the most hyped deck as far as I can understand in Expanded is Toad Decidueye, and that's probably the deck I've ended up testing against the most, just because it's super popular at my league. Like a lot of people are playing it, and so yeah, let's talk about that split. Let's talk about why we like Toadbats over Decidueye. Where are we landed in this debate right now? And let's start with Eric. He's probably our Toadbats expert, at least for the moment. Eric, why do you think bats are better than Decidueye?
Yeah, so I wrote a whole article already on this on PokeBeach. So if you want if you want my whole opinion, I guess, already written out, like, go check that out. But I'll talk about it here too. So the reason I don't like Decidueye at all is because it basically, all the consistency that the bat line brings you and all the benefits that it gives you, you lose just by giving you the 20 damage every turn instead of like once you put it in play, which I don't think is really worth it, because Toadbats was never really like lacking damage. That was never Toadbats' issue. Toadbats is a control deck. Like, yes, you're only hitting for maybe 50 a turn with a laser and a Fighting Fury Belt, and then maybe 20, 30 more plus some bats, but you don't need to hit for 110 a turn or 130 or whatever you could hit with Decidueye. That's not what Toadbats is about. Toadbats is about Silent Lab, like Getsus, getting them locked where they're not gonna have any options to like draw through their deck or use any cards. Delinquent, and I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Oh, Super Scoop Up. Super Scoop Up's like the most important thing that you lose in Decidueye, because you just don't have the room, because you have to run all these cards to get your Decidueye lines out. And Super Scoop Up is like one of the most broken cards in Toad, because it denies prizes. Like, people use it to get their bats back, but you use it, the best use of it, in my opinion, is to deny prizes, because that's like how you achieve like a true lock. Just never let them take prizes, never let them get more resources into their deck. So losing that, plus you're also not going to get the turn 1 Quaking Punch nearly as often, because Zubat has free retreat while Rowlet doesn't. So you have to run Float Stones, which you have to attach to get onto your Rowlet, or you can attach an energy to it and not get the turn 1 Quaking Punch unless you're going first, but you're not going to get it regardless there. So yeah, Rowlet is way worse than Zubat, and I just don't think that the benefits that Decidueye gives, which is just consistent extra damage every turn, I don't think that benefit is worth like losing all the benefits that that bats give. Excuse me. So yeah, I think Decidueye is awful in Toad. I think if you're gonna partner Decidueye with something, do it something that's not Toad. Maybe Vileplume, maybe Tauros. I don't know, but Toad is not the partner for it.
Travis, anything else you want to add?
I think I like pretty much follow the same logic. I mean, like I even played after Anaheim Sunday night, I actually was like had an argument with one of the his name's Frank. He's from Ohio. He like is with his friends with like Mahone and those guys, and I guess their group was like all about Toad Decidueye. They're like, it's so much better than Toad Bats, and I like built Toad Bats right then because I was like, there's no way this deck's any good, and I like beat him in a best of 3, and it was like it's like because Toad Bats like kind of like what Eric was saying, like you're taking out all of the cards that make Toad Bats what Toad Bats is, just so you can support your Decidueye line. Like you don't have like Gets a Silent Lab, you don't have Super Scoop Ups, you don't. I mean. Like, I like get why people think Decidueye is better. I like understand it, but I think that when they look at Toad Bats, if the reason that they think Decidueye is better is because they think that the only aspect of Toad Bats is that bats let Toad do more damage. Like, I don't think they really think about the rest of the stuff. Like, and like, I even have a Toad Decidueye deck online that like has 4 lasers, and it has like 2 Silent Lab and 2 Forest, right? And it's like, ooh, this is like still kind of Toad Bats. But it's still not Toad Bats. Like the whole line doesn't have free retreat. I mean, you with Toad Decidueye, you're more in a hurry to try to set up because you want to start getting that damage down. With Toad Bats, you can kind of just like evolve a Zubat into a Golbat, Quaking Punch, and then like Crobat, AZ, and like evolve another Golbat, Quaking Punch. Like I don't know, you don't have to run level walls. You don't have to run like supporters. Or you don't have to like play your supporters more aggressively just to set your line up. So I think that I'm basically follow the same line of thought that Eric does.
Yeah.
I think the reason people think Toad...
Go ahead.
Sorry, just one last thing. I think the reason people think Toad Decidueye is good is because it's a shiny new thing that just came out. Just because it's like brand new doesn't mean that it's better than the like set in stone archetype that's been performing for 2 years. Like clearly Toad Bats has something going for it. I don't know why people are trying to mess it up by playing Toad Decidueye when it's just not a good deck. Just don't play it. Don't.
Okay. So I think we're more or less all in agreement. I wrote about this too last month in my 6 Prizes article, and it was more just theory. Like I hadn't actually tested it yet, but I just sort of weighed the pros and cons of both, and sort of the deciding factor more or less is it does the infinite damage of Decidueye outweigh, because that's essentially the only pro, that it has, whereas Toad Bats has like all these other things. And it was just sort of a question is like, does maybe that infinite damage, is it just worth it? And I think the answer is no, just like the other 2 people here today. The only sort of opinion that I want to add that I don't think has been vocalized is the retreat cost, which I guess Eric touched on with Rowlet. It only has 1, and then Decidueye has 2. But in a lot of my testing, that's just what it came down to. Multiple games, I was testing like a weird Toad deck. It was one of the first decks I played. With like Genesect and G Booster, it was sort of like this older Worlds deck, but every game I would just win by bringing up the owl lines and just running them out of energy and stuff like that, and it was super easy, and it just happened every game. And like under Quaking Punch or Trevenant, perhaps like you can't attach Float Stone, and so this like the retreat cost I think is the biggest flaw between the 2, whereas all of Crobat free retreats, and that's just so good. That helps you like more than you'd know. Like a lot of times in your Toad mirrors, it's like opening Zubat can almost decide the game sometimes. I've played, had to play the mirror multiple times at tournaments, and I open Toad and my opponent opens Zubat, and I just like immediately lose because like I get lasered. Yeah, I'm immediately pressured to super scoop up. For a while, head ringers were staple in the deck, so I would open Toad and they wouldn't, and they would get a head ringer on my first Toad and just like nonsense like that. But I think it's interesting. We could easily be proven wrong. Results will speak louder than words. So maybe this weekend, this Ohio group or maybe another group really have the better list. Maybe with a couple card choices we haven't considered. But sort of to end this topic, to talk about it, last week I ended up playtesting a lot against Toad Owl, and after 3 or 4 games, I convinced the person I was playing to test out something else, and instead of Toad Owls, it was more like Toad or Owls with big basics, and it still played 1 Toad, but it was more reliant on, it had some Tauros, Lugia, and the Espeon-EX that devolves everything. And I thought that deck was way stronger. It was way harder for me to beat, because one of Toad's biggest problems, obviously, is its grass weakness, which grass is a fairly popular type in Expanded. And when you have 3 of this Pokemon's your main attacker and it's weak to grass, you're just usually going to get blown out of the water.
Depends on the deck.
And only having 1 Toad and Tauroses and Ninja Boys and sort of ways to deal with evolutions. It was really interesting. It was a deck that I thought looked pretty good. I'm not sure if our list was very good, because we kind of made it in like 2 minutes, just changing a couple cards from the Toad Owl deck. But it seemed promising to me. But anyways, those are just our final thoughts on Owl versus Bats as paired with Toad. So I guess next, we've mentioned it a few times. Eric, do you want to go ahead and talk about Lurantis for a little bit?
Yeah, so I think Lurantis is probably the sleeper play for this weekend. Lurantis, I think the main thing that it has going for it is just its matchups against what we perceive to be the 3 best decks in the format. We think the 3 best decks going into St. Louis, and I don't think a lot of people would disagree with us. I think they're probably universal. Like, the 3 decks that everyone's looking out for are Yveltal Maxis, Toad Bats, and Trevenant. I think those 3 are probably the 3 decks that, are the 3 tier 1 decks in the format right now, and Lurantis bodies all of those. Lurantis has no issue with item lock, because it's going to be healing itself every turn. You can get your energy out of the discard. You can evolve on turn 1 and start attacking, and you're OHKOing their Trevenants before they become breaks with your second attack. So that's huge, and obviously Seismitoad is a really easy matchup as well. And we play Virizion-EX, so they can't laser you or anything, so that's a way to get out of that. So I think it just has really good matchups against those. And Yveltal Maxis, that matchup is fine, even if they get out Archeops, because we play a lot of backup attackers like Lugia and basics like that can just help if you can't get your sorry, I forgot the name of the Pokemon, Lurantis, out for a second. Yeah, if you can't get your Lurantis out, then you have those big basics to back you up. We also play a Hex as well to get around it. So we have ways around Archeops, and Lurantis just trades extremely well with Yveltal just because it heals and only hits for 3 energy, and it's just a huge 2/10 attacker. Plus, also, if you play a Muscle Band, you're going to be one-shotting an Yveltal-EX without a Fury Belt with your Chlorocyte GX after just 3 energy. So Lurantis is just really good against the 3 big decks in the format, and I think it's just a really good deck because of that. I don't know. I really like it. Do you have anything to add, Britt? Travis?
I'll go next. I've definitely worked on this deck a fair amount too. And I don't think I'm as optimistic as Eric at the moment. It's definitely good. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely very strong, and I think will thrive in the right metagame. And I'm just a little skeptical. I mean, obviously, I think we're going to lose to Flareon. But the Night March matchup is tough. And Night March is, again, just sort of like a deck that people play sort of regardless of the metagame. And while it hasn't really posted up results in a long time, it's, I would still expect to see it. Maybe you won't play against it, but you'll probably sit next to it a couple times. And that's somewhat worrisome. And I guess, again, hinges down to our discussion on whether or not, Karen is just, solving that problem. There was something else, too. I can't think of it. I can't think of what I was going to say right now. Oh, no, Lurantis is, in my testing, doesn't have a great time with Tauros. And I don't know how big Tauros is going to be in Expanded. It's definitely a little bit worse with Gallade being out there, but I love that card. Tauros is one of my favorite Pokemon, so I'm probably a little biased on it just because I'm so excited when I get to play with my favorite Pokemon in competitive decks. But that's definitely one of the biggest problems I've had. Again, like we talked about last time, you just have to respect the Ninja Boy Tauros play in almost anything that plays DCEs. And so I guess that's all I really have to add. I like Lurantis a lot, and again, think it's got some good typing. Looking forward, grass is just strong. But I could play it. I could see myself playing it. I'm just not sure. Travis, do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, you guys kind of covered it. I agree. I think Lurantis is in a very, very good position in the metagame. I think the Gardevoir deck that Eric mentioned has pretty good matchups against what should be popular. I think that like kind of the theme of this weekend is like watch out for Archeops, and it's like I think that whatever deck you play this weekend either like should be Eviltal Maxis, or you should like make sure you're fine against Eviltal Maxis, which unfortunately has kind of been a reoccurring theme in Expanded. Even if it's not a constant, it's always something that pops up every other tournament or so. So I mean, just if you're trying to evolve, make sure you can get around Archeops long enough to make it a non-factor. But I do think that decks like Lurantis and decks like Gardevoir that, if they can just get up to their stage 1, then they're insanely strong against like Yveltal. Yeah, I think that's really all I've got to add to it.
Yeah, awesome. I think that was a good discussion for today. And just so looking forward to this weekend, Eric and I, Travis won't be able to make it this weekend, but Eric and I will both be in Collinsville competing. So we're super excited about that, and just expect another episode from us sometime next week, and hopefully we'll have some good results to discuss, and we'll be able to analyze the metagame a little bit, and then I think the next big tournament after that is Australia. Is that correct?
I think
the
so.
international tournament. And I don't think any of us are going to that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll definitely be able to. We'll shift our focus back to Standard, and sort of rediscuss what we think will be good, for this next huge tournament. I don't think it'll be that big, just because it's sort of difficult to get out to Australia, but there's definitely going to be a lot of people there either way, so it'll be something to talk about. Do you guys have anything else to add before we leave?
No, just look out for a lot of our expanded deck breakdowns in this coming week. We're going to try to get out as many as we can before Collinsville. So look for a bunch of like individual deck breakdowns like we had last week with Toad. And we hope you enjoy the content. And if you like what we're doing, come say hi to us at Collinsville. We'd love to talk to you guys. Say hi, meet our fans, I guess, if we have any yet. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to add.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you later.